thing obviously is also to strengthen local faith institutions. Though we might not agree with different faith systems, if you belong to one faith system, obviously you say, I don't agree with the philosophy of the other faith system. But we need to also understand that faith systems in general do have a platform of unconditional compassion or mercy or compassion towards the others. Bless you. And I think that's important. Yeah, that was the soprano bit, but I think she's telling me that your time is up. Thank you so much for the notes. So, I think strengthening faith systems to do good work for humanity, for all people, sort of like the 7th century or the 11th century Sufi, Indian Sufi, Maulana Muhyiddin Chishti of Ajmer, that has sort of the thing that says, love towards all, malice towards none. That kind of platform where religious institutions work for love towards all and malice towards none. I think that's very, very important. I think it's also important for us to sort of make a safe space for debate and dialogue. Maybe dialogue, not debate, but dialogue. So we can sort of, a lot of times people, especially even theologians, they don't talk to each other, they talk about each other. So because they study the books of other faith and they study things and they start judging things from that. I think it's important to also have a safe space where we talk to each other, where we don't just talk about each other, or judge each other, but we talk about each other. I think illuminated theologians all across have a common understanding, and I always find myself talking to the choir. We all sort of, one way or another, agree on lots of basic things. It's what's also important for us, even though we're in 21st Gregorian century, is to strengthen the role of women in society. I don't think that religions had a direct role in a prohibitory role or a preventive role, but surely, as you all know, for the past couple of thousand years or even more in human history, there has been this amalgamation of culture and religious values. Both of them are together. Obviously, that's very, very clear, because a Christian in Ethiopia does not necessarily have the same Christianity to a Christian in Ethiopia, in the foothills of Ethiopia, does not necessarily look at Christianity the same way someone in my home state of Georgia, where we have mega churches, and Christianity means a whole different thing to that person. So faith system also, how you perceive a faith, is different. But oftentimes throughout history, faith, religious values and cultural values. So like I said, there's a lot of influence. The reason I brought that example is there's lots of influence of culture on religion. So it may be different. And surely women have not been treated fairly throughout history. And that's not native to one faith system. That's across the board. And so we're minorities as well. So I think there's a lot of work needed to sort of, number one, promote and strengthen the role that women can play within our communities and within academia, within theology, and also challenge some of the myths that were also presented, whether they were adopted under a religious rhetoric or were not, regardless. I think with that, I'll conclude here. And I don't know if there's any time, but if there's any time, I'd be more than willing to take any questions y'all have. Thank you.
Absolutely. Professor Nunu, we have got 5 minutes more, so maybe we could just take 1 or 2 questions. Now, if you want, you can press a button if you want to ask a question. Maybe I allow 2 questions. Yes, there's one.
Professor, my question is this. Now, how can you define life in the absence of the Holy Book?
I'm a person of faith, so faith is very important to me. But I don't want to answer from, it's not fair for me to answer on behalf of my atheist colleagues. But they would define it as a lot of shared values, I think, with communities of faith, except the element of faith. Meaning you live good, you love God, or no, sorry, know God for them, but love people, do the best you can, and move on. Obviously, as you know, this issue of science, can I get some empirical data that God exists? And if I can't get empirical data, then God does not exist, and I need to live my life, and this is just it. That's what it is. So that's just a view of some people in the world, and you know, there are fellow brothers in humanity. For me, obviously, I believe that judging that there is no, going to the conclusion that there is no God based on the empirical data, that there is no direct evidence to the existence of God from an empirical data point of view, is an ontological gap. You're going from science to philosophy all of a sudden. You're saying there's no evidence that I have, scientific evidence, therefore there's no God. But having no evidence of something doesn't mean the lack of its existence. So again, it jumps from science to philosophy. That's it. There's an ontological gap. There's a gap. But you know.
Good evening, okay, I just wanted to ask, your point about the non-violent extremists and the violent extremists, you said that for the future that to teach children that, you know, not to be violent or whatever, but then wouldn't that be teaching them to have non-violence, like to have more thoughts then?
To have more
thoughts, because you said that non-violent extremists are more dangerous than the violent extremists because they have thoughts and get themselves in thought.
Yes.
But then by teaching the kids not to be violent, wouldn't that be like encouraging them to have thoughts and just keep it quiet and bottle it out of them?
No, good question. What we would like, from a theology or a spiritual perspective, what we'd like to do is encourage them to have positive thoughts, not violent thoughts. To teach them that, and obviously, again, I don't want to put my sort of, from a spiritual point of view, evil thoughts, violent thoughts have ramifications spiritually on you. So instead of harboring and having violent thoughts or negative thoughts fester, and obviously from a medical point, from a psychiatric point of view, as you all, negative thoughts are 80%, and that's where you have the placebo, that's where you have the psychosomatic symptoms, that you have all that stuff. So there is absolute evidence for negative thoughts, and it's physiological and pathological contribution. So the best thing is to teach them to have positive thoughts and negative thoughts. And also, non-violence from a theological perspective. And again, I think that a lot of people throughout, a lot of academics throughout all faith systems will agree that their faith system is also non-violent. Doesn't really mean being passive. I don't want you to think that non-violence means, you know what, everything happens, it doesn't. Absolutely not. It means exactly the opposite. You do absolutely everything you can do in your power in a non-violent way. And in that sense, then, non-violence is the weapon that knows no defeat. Because, you see, violence cannot extinguish violence. Hate doesn't extinguish hate, love does. Violence does not extinguish violence. Non-violence does. And non-violence is the language of the inarticulate. Non-violence is the language from a spiritual point of view of the world, yes.
I have an ethical consideration to allow the professor to finish because he needs to leave at 7:45 for another appointment, but we are just to express our gratitude and thanks. You know, normally in response I will highlight the important points, but that is your job. And I'm not going to tell you what the important points are, but I just spoke to my colleague, Professor Bayers, and we're going to have that video clip uploaded onto ClickUp, so you can listen to it over and over again. And please look at your ClickUp regularly, because for the REL 210 students, my students, I will be putting up the questions for you on ClickUp, all right? And you need to respond to those questions. I'm not too sure about yours, I don't. You also put it up. Okay, Professor Bayer will also put that up for his students as well as the other first years. I'm not too sure if the other lecturers are here. If you are here, then obviously you need to put yours up also on ClickUp. Alright? Alright. So your question will go up on ClickUp tomorrow, so please have a look at that thing. Once again, Professor Linaway, thank you indeed very much. Much appreciated.